All right, everybody. So today we are back with Abel Csabai for another Q&A.
Hi,
All right, and we're
good to
gonna
be
jump,
back.
gonna get right into it. Yeah, we didn't do one too long ago, but more or less, if somebody's sending me questions in DMs or whatnot, I'll just say, we'll add it to the next one. It kind of keeps it going. So don't get to every one
Mm.
of them, but a decent amount. You were back on Instagram a little bit recently, right?
Yeah, I have been. Maybe I'm just getting my hopes up too much, but
Okay.
I was just reluctant to get too active there. But I mean, it's been around this account for 2 years at this point or something, and still
Yeah, I was
not
just
getting
pulling it
banned.
up
So
here.
who knows? Maybe they have gotten over. Now I'm actually thinking the reason I had one account after the other banned is because I was doing them from the problem was with the device because
Hmm.
one device on my old laptop actually was getting that message that like you made too many suspicious accounts or something from this IP address.
Oh,
So
okay.
yeah, maybe that was the thing.
I think also I remember seeing something with Zuckerberg talking about that they just need to be less, they need to have fewer instances of people just getting deleted randomly. Now, I don't know if that was specifically to Facebook or also included Instagram and all of Meta. I'm not sure, but I did see him mention that.
Yeah, yeah, but Instagram, is it still big? Instagram, is it losing
Yeah.
traction? Because I don't know, I'm not that active there, so.
As far as I'm aware, it is. I'm not on TikTok. I don't have a TikTok, but I do see. I mean, I still, when if I sign on, there's still like a million different things and everything. So I think it's as big as ever because TikTok is not, it's still, I guess, social media. And for people who are on TikTok, if you're listening, maybe you can comment because again, I don't have one. But and they actually stopped allowing you to view TikToks if you don't have a TikTok. Before you could view them, but you just couldn't like, go into the comments or whatever. Now you can't even view it without a TikTok, which is almost better. I just tell people, sorry, can't view it, and then I'm just done with it. But there's not, there's comment sections, but I think one of the biggest things with Instagram is you kind of have this whole community where you can like DM people and talk to people. I don't know if you can do that on TikTok. I don't think originally you could.
Mm.
And that's one of the things like when I've said this before, but when I first started, it was all about YouTube. And now I don't know if it would be worse to lose the YouTube or the Instagram. I guess it would be worse to lose YouTube because there's just a lot more work involved there. But Instagram is
Yeah.
really the social platform where you connect with people. Like that was one of the big things when mine got deleted randomly last year. It was just, which is almost exactly a year ago now that I think about it. And as we talked about, that was, like I just couldn't communicate with anybody. So that made it very difficult for all the YouTube stuff
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah, I mean YouTube definitely like can you because the worst thing about the Instagram one for me was that I couldn't even get at least my data back that I had there that was
Mhm.
mine. So like at least the content that I uploaded, like could I at least download it like I could on Facebook, for example. So I got kicked out of there as well at one point.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But I could download all my conversations, all my pictures, comments, like the whole thing. So I
Yeah.
mean, at least if you're gonna get executed, at least get a Last Supper or
Yeah,
something.
yeah, right. All right. So first question here by Kyriakos Christophorou. I'm gonna just guess that he is Greek.
Kyriakos
Hey
sounds
man,
like
how
it.
did you maintain weight and body fat percentage after the end of the cut? Talked about most recent post. Did you just add 100 calories every week for 8 weeks while doing 4 cardio sessions per week? So obviously that's the question to me, but we can talk about you kind of maintaining leaner as well because you've gotten leaner than I have. So I mean, you've dropped into like the
Mm,
160s and stuff. So um, for me, it's been a combination of increased activity and decreased appetite is the main difference. I mean, if you look at my kind of log as I wrote things down along the way, my intention was, okay, I'm like 210. I'm going to go down to, I just kind of want to feel healthier, get cardio. And I said, I really don't have any desire to be lower than 190. I don't have a need to be. Like, that's just kind of where I'm going to be. And I think it's going to be healthier for me. It was pretty easy. And I was like, all right, I'll go down to 185, but I'm going to go back up to 190 when I'm done. Hit 185. We had a beach trip coming up, and I'm like, all right, like I think I can really push and hit 182 for the beach. And I was still having at least two fairly sizable cheats per week. This was during this low saturated fat experiment. So that's another point to bring up. Just inherently, if you're limiting, whether it's you're limiting saturated fat or carbs or whatever, you're just gonna have fewer food choices. And so therefore I was just more full. And so honestly, like when I got down to 182, I was like, this is it. Went to the beach, had all the food I wanted, and then came back. I was only a couple pounds heavier, and I just kind of kept going eventually to a low, like actually in the 170s. I was quite lean. And in a sense, like I don't want to make it sound like there's any sort of secret or anything like that. I was doing 4 sessions of cardio per week, whereas I used to do two, and just a clearly lower appetite than I used to have. Like Abel, I remember you and I don't remember this a couple of years ago, and you were like, "Oh, what do you think of like doing a YouTube video?" And we basically just have like a cheat day on camera and just eat as much as
Yeah.
we can. And at the time, I was like, I don't think that's like the best idea. But especially now, I'm like, dude, like I would just tap out like way earlier. Like for me,
Mm.
a very significant day is like anything over 5,000. I mean, I've had probably 3 days just over 5,000 in the last year. Whereas like, way back, I used to have these ridiculously massive cheat days. And now, like a kind of free day eating whatever I want is like mid 4,000s. My average is about 2,900, which I will say I'm pleased with how much I'm able to eat and still maintain. I was exactly 180.0 this morning. And I'm averaging about 3,000. Whereas like I just watched a full day in the life thing from Eric Helms that he had sent me, and he's about 10 to no, he's probably like 15 pounds heavier than me. And he was eating an estimated 2,600, 2,700. Now he's not doing cardio, but he's doing way more with his workouts, way more volume than I am. So it just goes to show, you got people like Steve Hall and Alberto Nunez on the one direction, and then some people who would be eating even less than Eric. And I'd say I'm probably pretty in the middle, whereas I grew up as a fat kid, thought, oh, I have a slow metabolism. We know there's a lot of flawed reasoning with that stuff. But anyway, just to say, part of it is just aging, less appetite, more activity, and limited food options in that because I don't have fattier meats, fattier cheeses, and things like that, I am focusing more on like there's just more volume to my food.
Yeah. That's yeah. I mean, it's interesting. I mean, it was pretty similar for me as well. I mean, when I was at my leanest, I definitely didn't maintain that, but I have maintained some leanness a couple of years ago for quite a long time. That was similar to where you're at now, and that was after a pretty long diet. And I remember it took a couple of weeks until I kind of settled into my maintenance lifestyle, but it was really just a matter of finding a new routine and sort of setup and structure to my daily eating that was satisfying. But what I always find interesting is how, I don't know if you had this now, but this sort of rebound hunger as you start increasing calories, or maybe not rebound hunger is the maybe not the best term, but it's almost as if I get hungrier as I'm adding in food for a
Sure.
period. I don't know if
Yeah.
you had that.
I have definitely had that numerous times. I kind of experienced it almost like a couple months later in this case. It was a little bit unexpected because I was like, oh, it's not coming. And then all of a sudden it did come. I have another thought on that, but finish your thought first.
No, it's just I was thinking about what is causing that, and my my guess would be that it's something to do with the brain just sensing food availability and basically just ramping up hunger accordingly. So I would guess that when you are maintaining a deficit for a long time and you're losing body weight, but maybe more so just to do with food availability and what you're eating day to day. Basically, the brain just senses that like, okay, clearly there is food shortage here, so it doesn't make sense to keep you chronically at this massive appetite. Of course, as I'm kind of slowing down in my speech because I'm realizing that that also goes against a bunch of other things that we know about the brain, that it wants you to survive. So it also wants to make you hungrier. And it does, like your baseline level of hunger is higher, but this sort of, it's actually more so the cravings and just that food noise, food thoughts that you have like that. That's what I notice, that those go up
Mhm.
when I'm freshly increasing calories. And
That's
that
what I was
might,
going to
yeah.
comment on too. just that
Hmm.
I do think part of it is expectation. So like you can imagine, you ever think back to high school or something, right? And you're at the start of the semester and you know you have this whole semester to go. So you're not really thinking about your vacation or summer or anything like that. But those last couple of weeks, man, it's just like dragging. You're like, come on, right? And that could be for
Yeah.
anything. You're about to have some food at a restaurant and your mouth starts watering. And I have absolutely noticed that, unfortunately, at times when something is reintroduced, it just makes you want more of it, particularly kind of cheat foods. And similar to the term with bulking, some people are like, "Oh, like bulking," and like I've said before, I'm not going to change the way I speak about it. Like bulking doesn't necessarily mean a dirty bulk, right? We just mean like gradually adding weight. I'm also not going to do that with cheat foods. Yes, there's a whole, you can get to a whole thing. Oh, is it cheat? Should you call it a cheat? Is it a healthy way to look at it? You know what
This
I'm saying.
causes eating disorders.
Right, right. Yeah, a cheat food, like a brownie or a pizza. That's what I'm calling a cheat food. So you know what I'm talking about. So when those are incorporated, there's definitely some aspect of like, oh, but now I want more of that. And you and I had a good kind of debate slash discussion many years ago of, are you more likely to want to cheat when dieting versus when bulking? And they were for different reasons, right? And it's like when bulking, it's more because like you're bored, you want an excuse like or something to help you eat more calories. Whereas when dieting, it's kind of like this almost like just desire for more calories, and like this almost need for it. So anyway, what I found after this diet was I didn't really have that many cravings. And then I said, okay, I haven't had like this like rich Indian food, like a chicken makhani, like a chicken tikka masala, korma, like all this like really rich stuff. And we had it and it was delicious. But like the next day, I wanted to get more. And then it's like, oh, Chipotle added brisket back. I haven't had that in a long time. It's really good. Got it. Next day, wanted more. My sister brought over these crumble cookies, which is like my weakness and that there's all this variety to it. There's like new cookies every day. And I ate a lot of them. And again, this wasn't like unplanned. I incorporated it into my diet. But the point was like when I had it, it just made me want more and more. And then you see this with a lot of things. You see this with people who have like issues with porn and then they finally quit. If they just do a little bit, then they go down this whole rabbit hole. And so I think when you're adding calories back, if you're adding like a little olive oil and like a little like extra piece of fruit, probably it's not going to do like a whole lot. But as you start to add more, and if you start to say, hey, I'm going to allow this treat and this treat, I think sometimes that can just make you kind of go off the rails if you're not careful.
Yeah, yeah, and it's definitely a mindset shift thing as well. So when you're dieting, you're not really expecting yourself to feel completely normal or fully satisfied at all times. So if
Yes.
you like sort of you're living with the feeling that okay, I need to sort of switch off that side of me that is prone to be thinking about food or giving into these temptations because you know that they are going to come. So it's almost like you have your guard up. Whereas when you're out of the diet, you're expecting to feel good and also I guess the long-term perspective, it's a very subconscious thing and maybe not everybody's overthinking it to this degree, but if you have cravings to some degree every day and you're not in a deficit anymore, I mean, what does that say about the future? Like, this is how life is going to be from now on. It's
Yeah.
like there is no end in sight. Where it's like, okay, I might be having the worst cravings ever, but in theory, I could just tough it through because I'm not going to be dieting forever. So,
Right.
so it's
Yes.
also a mindset thing. Yeah.
Yeah, there's so much about this behind, with the mindset. And honestly, I mean, we're obviously getting off of a tangent from the original question, but I mean, that's like, in my mind, that's the difference between somebody who has disordered eating and somebody who just likes to eat a lot of food, right? A lot of it is the mentality. Is there that lack of control? Is that need and obsession over it? I just had a good talk with Helms yesterday, actually, where did you see my post about this Ninja Creamy or hear me talk about it with Steve Hall?
No, not the blender, right? But
Yeah. Well, no, the blender specifically. Yeah, yeah. I don't think you saw it yet, but I DM'd you asking if you'd heard of it because that was this whole thing. I'll probably actually, I think I'll do a video that it'll be released after this, presumably, but I think I'll do a video on me trying it because I suspect that people are overhyping it, but we'll see. Dude, I posted about that. I've had like dozens of people DM me saying it's life changing, it's amazing. And then I went on like Reddit or something, and I was like, is it overhyped? And I saw all these response like there's like an old thread from like 2 years ago, and all these people were like, I was expecting people to say, yeah, it's overhyped. 95% of the responses were, no, it's amazing, totally worth the cost, whatever.
But
And I'm
why?
just, well,
What does
that's the
it do?
thing. I'm like, dude, I make, so I don't want to like spoil it too much. I guess I will at least kind of like show my cards a little bit here. My suspicion is that if you are making these protein ice creams like Greg Doucette style, and for the record, I got to post my video too about it because I posted a couple years ago that like I've been making protein ice cream way before even Greg Doucette I think even had a channel. Like this is not like his invention, but I think if you were making these like airy, icy, berry filled ice creams, and then you do that and then you switch it to this Ninja Creamy, I suspect that yes, it's probably going to be a lot richer and like denser. But the way I
Mm,
make my protein ice cream is basically mostly frozen bananas. Anytime I've ever tried to sub out frozen like half frozen bananas, half strawberries, or half frozen bananas, half ice, or anything like that, it's just always worse. It's clearly less creamy. It's notably worse, even if you try to make it up with sweeteners and whatever else. So I suspect that when I do the exact same recipe of like banana, almond milk, some whey protein, I feel like it's going to be basically the same. But people are telling me I'm wrong, and I'd be glad to be wrong. But I'm like, it's the same thing. Supposedly, it's supposed to be so much creamier and fluffier. I don't know. That's what everybody's telling me.
yeah, okay, I'll be curious now.
Yeah, yeah, we'll see. Um, there was one other thing I saw. Will Tennyson.
Uh, is he the Canadian
I think he's Canadian. Yeah, pretty big
YouTuber guy?
channel. Yeah, yeah. He had
Yeah.
a video 4 years ago where he did again like a Grey Doucette thing, and he did a blindfolded taste test with his mom and I think sister, and they tried like a Wendy or no, a Dairy Queen Blizzard, and it was, whatever flavor equivalent to what he made. And they both rated what he made as better than what Dairy Queen made. And
Hmm.
I'm just like, I don't know if we just have different taste buds. I mean, again, I make some good food, some good protein ice cream. And again, that one he made, which was not a Ninja Creamy, that was just like a regular blender and like a Grey Doucette makes. I have never made anything that tastes as rich as like a Ben and Jerry's or Dairy Queen Blizzard or anything like that. So I don't know if that was just the difference between me liking super rich stuff or whatnot, but I don't know. I know you went down that rabbit hole a little bit more with like
Yeah.
volume stuff, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that was it was amazing for a while with these casein protein puddings that I was
Yeah,
making.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Because I mean, it was kind of bizarre. Like I almost started getting skeptical. Like, is this really this low in calories? Because it was this
Yeah.
gigantic amount, and I mean, for like I don't know, like 100 calories or something, and like normally I would have to eat like 600 for that volume from some decent product already. So it was some store-bought protein pudding, pretty good macros, and that was still like a sixth of the volume. And it was really good, but the thing is that I just grew so sick of it by the end of it. Like
Really?
it had this very particular like sweetenery aftertaste, which I'm pretty tolerant to. So
Yeah.
like I can eat what's it called, the Bolden Farms peanut
Yeah, yeah.
spread, which everybody wants to like throw up from. I'm like,
Yeah.
no, like this is great. Like, so I have very low standards for this kind of stuff, but even I grew sick of this. So I'm pretty sure that most people would
Do you
have
want to share the
just.
recipe you were making? I never made it how you made it.
Yeah, I will have to look it up though because it's been
Okay. We can
years and
post
years.
it. Yeah.
But honestly, it was pretty much nothing special. Just
Did it have any gum in it? Like, a lot of times they add these like
yeah,
guar gums and stuff like that.
it did, and then I had added some extra, and I
Okay.
had some pretty big disasters with that. Like I'm not sure if you had the pleasure of feeling like your gut is about to fall out from too much xanthan gum,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
but yeah, so I committed to that mistake a couple of times. But yeah, it definitely had some on its own,
Okay.
and but it definitely did help when I added some more.
What I've found is so because again, a lot of times I actually would make this ice cream. I don't even call it protein ice cream because it's mostly banana. But it could be a game changer. But what I noticed is I had a food processor, and if I just did banana with almond milk, banana with water, and then honestly, even that is good. sometimes it would come out super dense and other times it would come out fluffy. And I prefer it fluffy. And I don't know what the difference was. Like sometimes it would, sometimes it wouldn't. Same exact ingredient. Sometimes I was like, is it the temperature? I tried different temperature of water. I don't know. But if I add even 10 grams of whey protein, it will always be the fluffier version. So now I'm just like, okay, I don't care about the calories in 10 grams. So I'll just add whey. So it's a kind of a misnomer to call it a protein ice cream. It's kind of just like a banana ice cream. But I think
Hmm.
it presumably just because of the gum that's in the way, because a lot of these do have like some little bits of gum, which is actually annoying for my shakes. I don't know if and again, for people listening, I'd be interested to hear people comment about this because what I've found, and it's been across multiple blenders, is if you blend too long with a whey, especially if it's cold, it will get so voluminous, which can be advantageous if you're dieting, I suppose. But then I'm just like burping all the time and everything. So what I actually do with my morning shakes is I will put in like the cold green tea, the fruits and all the things that require a lot of blending time. And I'll blend that for, 30 seconds, get it completely blended. Then I'll put the whey in and then just do a quick 5-second blend and get that so that it's not so airy. Because if I were to put all the ingredients at once and do like a 30 to 60-second blend, you'll have 5 cups of total, volume go to 8 or 9 cups. I don't know if that's just me, but that seems to be every time I do it.
Yeah. Not. I'm not sure I have noticed that.
Really?
Um,
Okay.
yeah. One thing that's my recent pain point, which is kind of funny, is that I was very proud of these beautiful whey protein coffees that I was making. So I mean, honestly, sometimes I would just shake it in the shaker and then with just a little bit of water, then add boiled water to it, mix it together, and add coffee. So even like that, sometimes it worked. But if I used a blender before, then it was beautiful and it was
Mm.
not clumping up at all. But now recently, like no matter what I do, it just becomes this disgusting mess that is,
Mm.
like you cannot even drink it because it's just these clumped together
Oh, interesting.
knots in it. Maybe it's the type of whey protein, I don't know, because before I was using the Optimum Nutrition one, I think,
That's what I
and
use.
now it's
Yeah.
Cytec or one of these other brands.
Interesting. Yeah, the last comment I'll make on that, just because you were talking about how you got so tired of it eventually, is I have found that over the years, almost inevitably, you kind of gravitate back to towards just normal eating. And again, not everybody, not all the time, but I think about different phases I had and of like trying to make it easier or have more volume, like back when I was in dental school and I was drinking a ton of diet soda. Like I mean, just like a lot of like diet cream soda, and I loved it. And eventually, like now, diet soda just seems disgusting to me. Like it's not that I would never have it, but just that artificial. Like it's just too much sweet, and I love sweet. I have a huge sweet tooth, but then it was just, I don't know, unappealing. Sugar-free Jello was another one, right? Sugar-free
Yeah.
Jello, that was like a big thing back, I remember in like the 2010s. And so even before that, a lot of contest prep people would talk about this sugar-free Jello. Now it's like I'd almost just not, I'd rather not have that kind of taste in my mouth. Sugar-free gum. Used to have a ton of sugar-free gum. Don't do that anymore. Coffee, like, different coffees with sweeteners and everything. I was big on that. Now I don't really do that at all anymore. I kind of just stick with water. I don't know if it's more that, again, the decreased appetite. I've kind of just embraced the suck, as they say, but I don't do any of that stuff. And then again, at times I've made those much more voluminous protein ice creams. And if I were really hungry now and really dieted, I'm not saying I wouldn't go back to those. I probably would at times just to feel a little bit more full. But this banana ice cream I make, I mean, that's like, once a week on average. And that was, I don't know if I finished my train of thought before, but that was the conversation Helms and I were talking about because we were talking about this Ninja Creamy, and he had said that, he feels like to some degree some people are ritualizing food too much with it. And we had a whole discussion on, whether that's right or wrong and everything beyond that. But we both agreed that if you're basically like borderline fetishizing food and it's like this, again, this ritual where it's like, oh, my Ninja Creamy and I'm having 2 of these a day and I'm making all these recipes and like you're just focusing on it so much, I think that's probably not a good thing. Because my point to him was like, hey, I think food is a great joy of life. It absolutely enhances experiences, life experiences. Like it makes things better in many instances. But it's just part of like this thing, right? So like, yeah, Thanksgiving and it's part of that day, but you shouldn't be thinking about that for 2 weeks ahead of time and all this, you know what I mean? Like stuff like that.
Yeah.
And similarly with this, like I am looking forward to getting this thing and I want to try a few recipes, but then I think if it's good, I will settle into maybe a couple times a week I have it and it's just that thing, not all right, I got it. I mean, I've seen people do this with other foods too. They're like collecting like 100 recipes and they do all this stuff, and at some point your life is just revolving around it. And I do think that's problematic.
Yeah, definitely. And you can definitely go down the rabbit hole. And unfortunately and unfortunately, the internet will keep feeding you
Yes.
actually decent ideas. But I do remember some weekends where I would look up at one point and I would just have to think that, my God, I just spent the past 8 hours on this Sunday just trying to put together meals that are of a certain caloric density. And even if I got it done by the end, like that could have been 8 hours in which I'm not even thinking about the fact that I'm dieting, and
Right.
actually could have flown by very easily. And this way I've been kind of just obsessing over it. So it's definitely, it can get blown out of proportion.
All right, next question. So, Nick G says, "Hi Dave, big fan of the podcast. I did coaching with Steve Hall for a stint. Curious on your current diet and macros. I'm a fan of a more hybrid ketogenic slash low carb approach, meals similar to what you have shown here." So he was referring to where I had done meal prep, and basically my lunch almost every day for years has been like a sauteed spinach, chicken, garlic, onions, and then salsa, and avocado. Um, do you follow a lower carb approach now that you are staying a bit leaner? Cheers, and let me know. Okay. Cool. Well, thank you for the support, Nick. So actually, I don't think Abel that you've done much in the realm of like ketogenic, specifically low carb, other than low carb in that like you just got low calorie on everything, right?
So I did a lot of low carb and keto style things back before I would have gotten onto YouTube, for
Okay.
example. So that's if you remember that podcast that we did like some years ago with the three craziest things that we did on our fitness journeys.
Yes. Yeah.
It started with the people that I followed initially, and it was all
Oh,
like
that's right.
paleo, and then even like Gary Taubes was one of my
And like
big
the carb
gurus.
backloading guy or
Carb backloading.
something. Yeah, yeah, I
Yes.
remember this.
I was drinking bulletproof coffee.
Oh, really?
I have some of these Lyle McDonald style moments where I've been saying this 15 years ago
Yeah,
when
yeah.
like I saw a couple of years ago in some coffee place that they were selling bulletproof coffee in Budapest. And I
What
was thinking
was
like,
the guy's name? Keith, not Keith, was it Kiefer? Who's the guy who did the carb backloading
yeah,
popularization?
John Kiefer.
Oh, okay, it was. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so I mean, to answer this question, I mean, I've done keto well before it was popular, back in, I think 2007 was the first time I did it. I've done it numerous times. The last time I did it, I actually started getting these like palpitations. I don't know if it was like a electrolyte imbalance, but I couldn't really sort it out, and it was actually pretty just unsettling. So I have no plans to do, and that was like a true ketogenic diet, not just low carb. Um, I again, as I mentioned earlier, I grew up as a fat kid. I always thought, oh, like I need to be low carb, and I never found any superior results with being low carb, other than again, just that you have to bring carbs down to get lean enough at some point. You have to bring calories down, so inevitably you're not going to be high carb. And I honestly almost never focus on it at this point. I really recommend shooting for calories and a protein target roughly. And then as long as somebody's reasonable where the carbs and fats fall, I think for most people it's probably going to be fine and not make a huge difference. That's my experience and that of my clients as well. Some people are different though. Some people really do respond well to just like super low fat and carbs as high as possible, and vice versa. The biggest advantage I found to lower carb, even back in high school, was just steadier energy levels, certainly fewer crashes. But to answer directly, no, I don't follow a low carb approach. I mean, I could tell you like this week, typically, and I've mentioned this before, I typically have a more staggered approach to my calories. But because I'm away from work for a little bit right now, I have just kind of been eating like 3,000 a day. So yesterday, 2975 calories, and I had 260 grams of carbs. The day before that, I had almost 300 grams of carbs. The day before that, 300 grams of carbs, 331 grams of carbs, 307 grams of carbs. So like most days of the day before that was 200. So like most days I'm between 250 to 300 grams of carbs. Um, which if you just take the average of that and you assume it's a 3,000 calorie day, you're getting about 35% carbs. So like very balanced diet. Um, and if anything, I mean, I would say that's leaves slightly higher fat, but it really depends on the day. Like I'm having, again, just this past week, which is not totally representative of my normal diet. I'm actually having proportionally higher fat, like 100 plus grams of fat most days. So relatively, I guess you could say. But when I'm like in my normal schedule during the week, I might have almost like no carbs other than like some fruit and then like bigger meals on the weekend. So again, I think the ketogenic diet is fine. You got some people like Dom D'Agostino and people like that who've been doing it forever and have great results, but it's not something I recommend unless there's a reason that we're doing like a significant reason.
Yeah, one thing I will say, and I don't know if you can, or if you had the opposite experience, or for you there was no difference with low carb or not low carb in this regard, but like I found that, like now looking back, that I guess the ceiling, or maybe the floor would be a better term, as far as how lean I can get, or like how low I can push calories and body fat, was lower. So I couldn't get as lean on low carb without getting like really just hungry and just having food thoughts all the time, as I can on a mixed diet. So
Hmm.
I
So
guess
okay, just to clarify, you were able to get leaner more easily with higher carbs.
yes. So and I think the explanation is simply that when I started to push through that kind of comfortable settling range that my body has, I could sort of hack the system more easily with just adding in a whole bunch of food volume,
Yeah.
which is much trickier with low carb. I mean, it can be done, but it's not as satisfying. Like you can add a bunch more broccoli, and it's going to be one thing. Or on a higher carb, lower fat approach, you can add in a bunch of like melons and strawberries and things like that, and it's actually going to satisfy you somewhat as well. So I
Yeah.
think that's the only reason. I kind of same thing on carnivore. So if I was eating like a decent amount of food and a good amount of fats, protein, and didn't try to get super lean, then actually I felt very satisfied and very stable energy levels. But if I try to go into a deficit, then there came a point where the volume was very low, the fats were not enough still, and then you can sort of try to add in more volume by eating higher protein foods, but it's not going to be very satiating that way. So yeah, it's just my anecdote, but
Yeah, I for sure noticed that with carnivore. I would say carnivore, there is a narrower range where you are comfortable. So if you try to bulk on a carnivore diet, I mean, I definitely ate in a surplus from just meat when I did that experiment, but um, it's not enjoyable. And I would say for carnivore or ketogenic diet, much harder to eat high levels of calories for the average person. Conversely, dieting was also very hard on carnivore, where I mean, you literally have no volume. So, I mean, I
mm,
specifically remember eating, it was just 97.3 beef, or no, sorry, yeah, 93.7 beef. And that plus salt at that point where I was like really dieted down and very hungry. I mean, it was like an 8 or 9 out of 10 as far as enjoyment. Like it was so good because it was just fatty and salty, and I was so hungry. But it was just really hard to diet with that. And ketogenic diet, I haven't experienced that again, carnivore for sure. But ketogenic diet, obviously, I mean, if it's a true ketogenic diet, actually a lot of fruit and lower fat, or sorry, a lot of vegetables and lower fat can kick you out of ketosis. So you might not be in ketogenesis, but let's just assume here we're talking about just low carb or very low carb. You can have a lot of vegetables and everything, but to Abel's point, with these days, the amount you can make up with these like random voluminous options that tend to have at least some carbs in them, I would say yes, it's probably easier to diet if you're allowing a more mixed diet these days because of all the different options.
Yep.
All right. So Kenny asks, what is a good cardio recommendation? Want to get a better condition and heart health. Getting heavier, let me get gassed out pretty fast. Thanks.
Yeah, this
Yeah.
is a good question. I'm interested in the answer myself because I even asked you guys about your VO2 maxes.
Yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah. I don't think you ever answered why you became interested in that. Was that just like a random thing?
uh, no. So I think I arrived to that point in my life where I should be more responsible with. I'm back in the gym, like more seriously than I have been in recent times as well. So yeah, I would like to do that, and also it was a little bit longer ago, but it still hurts. Like I went on this hike with a friend of mine, and I was just left in the dirt so badly. Like, it was embarrassing,
Yeah.
and I just don't want that to happen again.
So I'm just gonna speak as somebody who would represent maybe the research, not, my own personal experience, because I'm in no way some advanced cardio athlete. I think if you're strictly talking about just general conditioning and heart health, if you're looking at the guidelines like the American Heart Association, they'll talk about 150 minutes of moderate activity or 75 minutes of vigorous activity a week, or combining the two. And obviously you can see like the 2-to-1 ratio there. And when I hear that, I think, oh, moderate intensity, that's like a jog, and high intensity is like sprinting, like zone two, work. And that is really not the case. Really, what they're referring to would be moderate activity would be like a hike through the woods, or, speed walking. And that's moderate, excuse me. And vigorous activity would be like a jog. So it's probably, if you're listening to this and you're like somebody who gets at it in the gym, they probably don't mean what you're thinking they mean. So I don't follow like those exact guidelines. Peter Attia would talk about if you want to optimize for VO2 max, you're going to want to do 4 zone 2 sessions per week. And those could be, 40 to 60 minutes, and the zone 5 session once or twice a week. And again, that's pretty laborious. And I don't
It's quite
think
a lot.
it is quite a lot. And then I know somebody who, not anymore, but has worked with Peter Tia for years. And I asked him what he does, and he does not follow those guidelines either. He does cardio like 2 or 3 times a week. It's pretty rare, I think, that like your typical working adult is going to have time for, I mean, and right now I'm doing 4 workouts with weights a week, 4 cardio sessions, and like another hour of rehab, calisthenics stuff on top of that. And like that's quite a bit. And I've talked about on the podcast, like wanted to cut that back a little bit. But in any case, I think if you are just somebody like, hey, I don't like that when I go up the stairs and I'm winded, or I just don't feel as good a condition, or I'm getting older, I think just do 2 to 3 sessions of dedicated cardio a week. I know there's debate about, do you need to do that if you're doing a lot of steps and whatnot? I mean, I think if you're looking at longevity data, sure, it does show that more steps are beneficial up to very high step counts. And if you're somebody like an Eric Helms, where you're doing 5 high volume workouts a week and you're not resting a long time, and you're getting up to 140, 150 beats per minute during your workouts, and you're getting 10,000 steps a day, okay, maybe that person doesn't need much dedicated cardio, but that's not most people. So if you're the average person, 4,000 to 6,000 steps, and, some like, okay workouts, I think you're almost certainly going to have a benefit from dedicated cardio. And if you're only going to be doing that 2 or 3 times a week, I would do it at a fairly high intensity. Not that zone two is great. Obviously, the more cardio you're doing, the more you can afford to put in some of that zone two. If you're only doing 2 sessions a week, I'd make them pretty high intensity. If you're doing 3 to 4, I would say do maybe like one high intensity and then 2 to 3 lower intensity, 30 to 40 minute sessions, things like that. And most people can get that in.
So when you say that you would make them pretty high intensity if you did only two, what intensity would that be like a legit interval training kind of protocol? So like 1 minute on, 1 minute off, and like 10 cycles or something?
So the protocol that Atia talks about, which again, I've kind of quote unquote called this out, because the way they initially described it was you would want to do 4 minute intervals. So it's like 4 minutes on, 4 minutes off, 4 minutes on, and you're doing that interval like 6 times. And they describe it as 4 minutes all out, like as hard
Yeah.
as you can. And I've talked about this, like that is utterly ridiculous. And I've seen sprinters comment in the comment sections of some of these things as well. Like, hey, like I was a high level sprinter. There is zero chance you are doing anything like that all out. So if you think about like what all out would truly mean, it would mean like the whole time you're going as fast as you can, which of course that's immediately ridiculous, right? Obviously you can only hold an all out sprint for like, seconds. So obviously
Yeah.
it's not like literally all out in that sense. And they're not recommending that. What they would say is an intensity where at the end of the 4 minutes, it's as hard as you could have gone. And
Mhm.
I would still call complete BS there because, and I'm not saying like you could maybe get to like a nine or like an 8.5, but I specifically remember doing like a treadmill race against two other people. And we just said, okay, we're going to set it at the max speed and we're going to see how long you can go. And it was 3 minutes, 3.5 minutes, and I got 4 minutes. And I was fried after that 4 minutes. And if you
Mhm.
told me that you're going to do that again 6 times or five more times after just resting for, like, there's just no way. Your intensity would have to drop so much between them. And again, I'm sure they are counting for the fact that you're adjusting, and obviously the second one's going to be slower than the third one, et cetera. But like I just think of when I've done like my all out, true all outs. Again, I mean, it'd be like Lyle McDonald on the whole leg volume thing. If you're doing a
Yeah.
set to failure, legitimate, cannot do another set of 12 squats and then you rest a minute or 2 minutes, like you're not doing this for 10 sets, right? Again, like referring back to those examples. So,
Mhm.
anyway, that doesn't take away from the general principle, which is a hard interval for 4 minutes and then 4 minute break, and then a hard interval for 4 minutes, 4 minutes break. I just when they say this all out stuff, and that just is when I kind of call BS. But
Yeah, I don't know why. So Brian, I had this conversation with Brian where like it's published that podcast. I had that like aha moment on camera because finally I understood how this is possible because I was always baffled where yeah I would do like on a stationary bike where you can like really safely just go all out.
mhm.
If I do a 30-second sprint all out, like I mean, I don't think that in the weight room, I mean, okay, maybe some high rep leg stuff came close, but it completely destroys me. So
Sure.
the idea that you would do this for a minute and then a minute easier, and then you would go again and you would repeat this like 8 times. But
Yeah.
but for some reason that's how everybody's talking about it. And then it's like, no, okay, so like all out in the sense that like you can maintain this for the entire duration, which I guess you can just start somewhere and then adjust upwards if it's too easy by the end. So I guess
That's the thing.
like
Like
that it
you're
could make sense.
inherently gonna slow down and adjust. So again, I'm not saying like because then you go too far the other direction and say, oh, I'm just kind of taking it easy so that like only the last one is that hard. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying there's a big difference between how your body can recover after a 9 out of 10 intensity and a true 10 out of 10 intensity, right? And I think it's more like probably the nine is what they're going for. And then like, you obviously have a lot more reserve after that.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Philip C. Do you have a comment about the cyclical ketogenic diet CKD? It's when you eat no/low carbs all week and Sundays, but on Saturdays, every Saturday, you fill up with carbs, and the diet is really high on protein. Um, so I would first clarify that that's not necessarily like it's not like a cyclical ketogenic diet has to be that. That is in theory, and again, the problem with some of these is like if you had 1,000 grams of carbs on that Saturday, you are not going to be in ketosis on Sunday. You're probably not going to be in ketosis on Monday, maybe. And he said the diet is really high in protein. Again, a true cyclical ketogenic diet is not super high in protein, depending on your definition of high in protein, right? I mean, obviously, like that could be subjective, but if and again, if you're too high, so if you imagine somebody who is one eating very high protein, like 1.5 grams per pound every day, and then two eating this huge high carb day on Saturday, you're probably in ketosis less than like a third of the week, if at all. I mean, seriously, like you're really just not gonna. And again, if you care about being in ketosis, I don't think the fat loss is going to be dependent on that. But if that's what you're going for, as far as opinion on it, I think it's fine. You're basically just doing like a cyclical, or it's almost like carb cycling. I mean, it's just a variation of carb cycling. As long as you're in a deficit and your protein is sufficient and your training is fine, if this is for fat loss, you're going to lose fat and it's totally fine. Anabolic diet was a diet that was around for many years that people, including myself, my freshman year of college, bulked on. Same principle. It's fine, but it's not what I would typically recommend.
Yeah, like so I guess the downside could be that you're basically just constantly in this state of trying to adapt to a ketogenic diet, but then like either never really getting there or getting there but kicking yourself out of it right away.
Yeah.
And that could just sort of leave you like falling in between the two options, just never quite feeling right energy wise. I'm sure there are differences between people, but if you're someone who tends to get this transition over to a low carb diet pretty badly, and it takes a while for you to adjust, then you could shoot yourself in the foot. So might serve you better to be a bit more consistent with an approach.
Yeah. And then they have, some people talk about like a TKD, like a targeted ketogenic diet. And at that point, like, why are you even calling it a ketogenic diet? Because these people would basically have carbs almost daily and surround it around their workouts, in which case, like, you're basically having carbs every day. You're just, I mean, I guess maybe it's still low carb, depending on your total, how much you're adding carbs. I guess, like, I remember when I was in high school, they would talk about eating, what were those called? Not like Pez dispenser candies. Um, I'm blanking on the name of them, but like those little circular candies that would come in like a whole stack of them, and because it was
Mm.
supposed to be like pure glucose, and they would basically recommend like just having that, and then you're back into ketosis right away. It was a whole thing that was just a lot of a lot of
Yeah, that's
unnecessary worrying for it.
yeah.
All right. Mindful Body Paris. Hey man, I'm still very skeptical on the maintaining trend Eric Helms is now also promoting. Do you think that to go from intermediate to advanced, gaining 600 to 800 grams a month, the old school way is still the best? I feel like it's much better than main gaining.
Hmm. Yeah, I was surprised that he said that now Eric Helms is also.
Yeah, I
Was
was
there ever a
surprised
time when he
too.
was not promoting that? Uh,
So, yeah, you
yeah,
want to
go
go
ahead.
first?
No, you go.
So again, I think with a lot of these things, the making the definition or defining the terminology is important. This is one of the issues that again happened with Greg Doucette for a while, where I've always been a fan of bulking, but again, I'm not going to change the way I'm. What I consider bulking is just slowly gaining weight at an appropriate rate. It basically just means gaining. To me, bulking is gaining. So many people just think of it as like 10 pounds in a week and eating all this crap. So if I say bulking, I just mean like a lean bulk. And Greg Doucette would talk about this maintaining and gaintaining and everything. And then like you look back, and I don't know if he just walked back what he was actually saying or what, but then all of a sudden you realize, oh, he also means like being in a few hundred calorie surplus and slowly gain over time and all this stuff. And it's like, well, yeah, that's called a bulk. Like that's just what we're doing. And
Yeah.
I don't know like Eric Helms' exact viewpoint on this, but if you're talking about, 800 grams a month, so like let's just say you're talking to like, 2 pounds, 1.5 to 2 pounds a month. That's what I recommend. I think that would be standard. I don't think that's against the old school. I mean, if you're doing that, you're talking 18 to 24 pounds in a year. That's way more than the amount of muscle that you're going to gain. Now, I disagree with the people who are, who go so slow where it's like a quarter of a pound a month and nothing's really happening. And, same thing why like reverse dieting was kind of silly. People were adding like 2 grams of fat and 5 grams of carbs, per week, things like that. I disagree with, but the rate of 1 or 2 pounds a month, I think is fine. And you're not going to be gaining more muscle than that anyway. There's the arguments that, hey, I want to be sure I'm in a surplus, but again, it doesn't take that long to see that you're gaining 1.5 to 2 pounds a month. Like I think that's a very reasonable rate. And I haven't talked to Eric Helms on that specifically, but if you look at his post-contest period, he gained like 20 pounds or something like that. Like I don't see him being somebody who says to not bulk or gain weight or have an off season. So I'm a little confused by
Yeah.
that. But in any case, no, I don't think the quote unquote old school way of just gaining a lot of weight, like, Lee Priest photos and stuff like that is good. I think a controlled approach early on in your career, your lifting career, a pound every week, I think is fine. Once you're beyond like intermediate, I think 2 pounds a month is fine. And then beyond that, you're kind of just hoping to get a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, like I think that the only problematic, so where it starts becoming impractical, and if you really care about building muscle, it could also be problematic somewhat, is when you start going below that 2 pounds a month sort of range. So I think when you only try to put on a pound a month, for example, like that's where you can do it. And sure, like I've had people presenting me different scenarios, like how they would go about this, and it makes sense. Like, okay, you have very standardized diet, you're eating the same foods, and you're consistent, and maybe you're not gonna get the calories exactly right, but over time, you're going to find your sweet spot. And sure, that works, but first of all, you have to keep in mind that the weekly weight gain that you're going for is so small that even the slight variation in the foods that you're buying in the store, like I mean, fuck, like even things like two identical chicken breasts, seemingly, but I mean, one chicken might have been slightly fattier than the other, and like it's a few calories only that it adds up to, but in the context of a whole diet, it can actually add up to something meaningful, which is going to wash out in 99% of scenarios. So if you're trying to gain 2 pounds in a month, then yeah, okay, whatever. 50 calories a day by which you're off is not going to matter. But if you're only shooting for like 100 calorie surplus per day, then it can actually add up to something. And you're also more likely to have these weeks where you realize that, okay, like the past 2 weeks, I actually just thought that I was gaining weight, but I just replaced the sauce that I'm using for
Right.
lunch and I dropped like a pound and a half. And it's like, oh, there goes my past month's weight gain. So you're just more likely to run into these unpleasant surprises. So I think 2 pounds a month is just such a practical to track as well. And also it's like even if it's a really unfavorable ratio of lean mass to fat gain, even then in 6 months, worst case scenario, you gained 6 pounds of fat. I mean, that's what is that like 2.5 weeks of mini cutting and you're done.
Yeah,
So
for sure. All right, I got about 15 minutes, so I'm going to try to crank through these here. So, Kevin D, this is a long one. So, hi Dave, love the podcast. The only fitness podcast I listen to any longer at 43 years old. Very relevant to me. I am asking your thoughts on the following. At 43, been dealing with severe ankle bursitis for 2 years now. I do a lot of cardio, some joint aches and pains. With that background, I began taking a combination of fish oil, ginger, and turmeric supplements, one pill each with dinner. They are not just drugstore supplements with some spices in them. I'm not here to promote anyone, but if you're interested, I can tell you the company. The short of it is that the turmeric is proceeded to include higher levels, I think it means processed, but anyway, higher levels of curcuminoids, the positive compounds. Okay. So he's basically just saying the great effects he's had there. Um, in a week of taking them, I feel dramatically better. Pain from ankle bursitis is greatly diminished. It feels best in 2 years. Used to limp all the time. The other joints are better too. What are your thoughts? It may be good info to share with your audience, especially the older members like me who still hit the weights hard and do a good deal of cardio. So basically, he's feeling a lot better from this fish oil, ginger, and turmeric supplements. And what do we think on it?
what do you think of it? By the way, if yours is the only podcast he's listening to, why should I even answer? So just kidding.
Yeah, Kevin, go check out Abel's podcast. I don't know if Abel's got like a true podcast. It's more a YouTube channel with occasional guests, I would say, is the
That's fair.
So I would say that it's great that that's the case. I would say that the research supports that. I don't know if the research on ginger would really support that too strongly. I'm sure people anecdotally would disagree with me. Fish oil, again, plenty of research on fish oil for brain health and heart health. some on joint health, and then a lot of research on joint health with curcumin, which is obviously, the active component there, and the turmeric that people are going after. So, and there's different variations. There's like Moriva, there's BCM 95. I take curcumin every day. I take 1.2 grams of actual curcumin. Again, I take the BCM 95 version. And I take it in part because I feel like it has helped. And when I've taken it out, I felt a little bit worse. And also just because of the research on it, and anti-inflammatory benefits and whatnot. But I remember I had like a mentor who had arthritis in his hands, and I gave him like a whole bottle of it. He said he didn't notice any benefit from it. But I'm sure, like, if you were to just Google curcumin joint health, you'd find, tons of anecdote, tons of articles on it. I think it's a cheap and safe supplement. So I would say for people that if it's something that you're interested in trying it, try it out. You're going to know within the first bottle of taking it if it made any difference for you, and if it didn't, then you could potentially stop taking it. I do think when it comes to things like that, it's a little bit harder to discern the actual overall health benefits not related to joint health. So this is why, like, if I take fish oil, it's not like I know right away that there's a benefit, but I believe there's enough evidence on fish oil that if you're not somebody who consumes much fatty fish during the week, there's likely a health benefit. And I would say the same thing with turmeric, although I don't, or curcumin specifically, though I don't hear as many people talk about it. And even like creatine, like I genuinely just do not notice a benefit when I start taking creatine or a detriment when I come off of it. But there's so much evidence behind it, and I don't eat almost any red meat that, and then same thing with like a lot of the research now on like brain health and everything that's come out on it. So I take it just because I believe in the evidence there, but some of these things you're not going to feel.
Yeah. Plus, when it comes to inflammation from or inflammation that you're trying to get rid of and using supplements for that. I mean, the cynic in me always says that, or the cynic in me says that whenever I hear someone say that I'm noticing a benefit, it's almost always from people who don't really have an issue. And it's just like, oh, my joints feel better. Like people who actually have something that is like really bugging them. I cannot even recall one instance where I heard someone saying like, yeah, I added in fish oil or curcumin and my joint pain is gone. So, I mean, if it's something really serious, then either you need something more serious than just a supplement, so you need some actual drug, or maybe it's something in your daily activity that you could somehow correct, or I don't know, get different footwear, or maybe something that you're doing in the gym, maybe not in this particular case. But also keep in mind, like when it comes to supplements or other things that you could take to help with inflammation, it's always worth looking at the things that you're doing the most frequently, which is the things that you're eating, right? So, I mean, there could well be something in your diet that you're eating regularly that you're just not liking. Like I did notice, for example, after some cheat days or whatever that I would be having, where I would be eating a ton of crap, that my joints would often feel just horrible the
Yeah.
day after. So that is a thing. So that might be worth looking into as well.
Yeah, I've heard a number of people talk about that. Joe Rogan talks about that. He'll be like, oh, like he eats mostly meats and everything, and then he'll have a day of pasta, and all of his joints hurt and everything. Um, but yeah, some people certainly like, seem to respond well to dietary manipulations. All right, so next question is by Jason. I want to say Spitalnik, who I told I would shout out his podcast. So you have to go to his Instagram. But he started a podcast recently, and I can always appreciate the podcast grind. So feel free to check out his podcast as well. Find him on Instagram and see what he's got to offer there. So
Hmm.
Jason said he wants to comment on recognizing the individual nature of programming. Any general suggestions for a person who is limited to 4 1-hour sessions per week? How to get sufficient stimulus and volume and cover all muscle groups? All right, good question. Abel, I feel like I've taken the lead on most of these, so let's have you go.
So 4 1-hour sessions, and how can he make sure that he gets sufficient volume for everything?
Yep.
So, I mean, it depends a little bit on the advancement of the person. And oh, are you drinking beer like that? Damn, you're the man. Just kidding. No, it looked like some Guinness bottle or something. So if you're a fairly average person in terms of your needs and what you respond best to, and you're not super advanced, then it's actually not that bad to only spend that much time in the gym or so. So that's actually a fair amount of time. You can get quite a lot done in that. So probably it's going to be roughly in the neighborhood of 10 sets per muscle group per week. And assuming that you want to train your whole body fairly evenly, or you want to develop most muscle groups in some even proportion, then you're gonna look at something like 60, 70 sets in total per week for your whole body. And that is not that difficult to distribute over 4 sessions. So that's, let's say, 15 sets, 15, 16, 17 sets per workout, 4 exercises per muscle group. Then you're looking at something like, I don't know, yeah, 5, 6 exercises per day. So and then it's just a matter of allocating that workload over the course of the week, and you can do it in a number of ways. But I guess a simple upper lower setup could work totally fine. I like more kind of hybrid full-ish body setups, but upper lower would be a good place to start. But then again, it really depends on who you are. So if you're someone who has been hitting it pretty hard for a longer time, and from experience that you respond better to higher volumes, and there are definitely those people who need more like 20 sets or even more per week to meaningfully make things tick up, then it might be a matter of prioritizing some things ahead of others. So it might be the case that you're not going to be able to fit everything in for your whole body and do the workload that is necessary. So you will have to kind of sacrifice some things. And that's fine too. It's just, that is basically just picking your battles smartly.
Yep.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I think for one, 4 1-hour workouts is plenty of workout time for anybody who's not, like a professional bodybuilder. That's plenty of time. I would say also, I would echo Abel here, where, I mean, there's a million different ways you could set it up as far as different splits. You could do body part splits and whatnot. Generally speaking, I'm almost always a fan of hitting a body part more than once per week, for optimal frequency. Although you could do something like a push-pull legs accessory day, and that accessory day is everything that you really want to focus on. So if you got a couple of weak body parts that you really want to hit harder, you could just do once per week frequency push-pull legs on, and then whatever you're again focusing on that accessory day, you're getting that extra volume there. I'm a big fan of upper lower split. That's what I currently do. Although I almost do like upper lower upper accessory, again, like focusing on various weak points or whatever I want to focus on at that time. So there's a lot of ways you can do it. And especially if you're utilizing, like this was a conversation, the Eric Helms podcast, I think we're probably going to do 2 parts. It'll either be right before this or right after this is released. And we talk about basically being efficient with drop sets and antagonistic supersets, which I pretty much always recommend and is super easy if you're doing upper lower. Obviously you just do back and chest, back and shoulders, biceps, triceps, or legs. You could do like a leg extension, a leg curl for quads and hamstrings, and then like squats with calves or leg press with calves. I mean, it's very easy to do those kind of supersets to save time. And I would echo, the volume recommendations Abel said. It's just for 4 1-hour workouts should not be too hard. I think when it comes down to the individual programming, that's going to be more as far as for you or for your coach to be aware of, how do you respond to doing one after the other, so that you might need to say, okay, if I'm doing upper lower, I probably don't want to do like lower and then the next like a heavy, squat intensive day, and then the next day I'm doing like heavy barbell rows, for example, or something like that. Like that's where you're going to have to kind of pay attention to things like that so that your low back isn't fried. lower injury potential and whatnot. But as far as the volume for that time, should not be too difficult.
Yep.
All right, so we got two more here. James P. Dave, huge fan of you and your podcast. I know that you periodically do Q&As with Abel. Yes, we do. I have a question that I don't think you've addressed and brings in both your dental and fitness expertise. Zero calorie soda and dental health. Unfortunately, the way I screenshotted this, like cut out some of the question, but basically saying we know sugar is bad. The acid is bad. I question as somebody who is into fitness and is trying to get pretty lean and drinks a fair amount of zero calorie soda, sometimes up to 5 to 6 per day. Should I be concerned about my dental health? All right.
I'll I'll do the dental part if that's okay, and
Yes,
then
sir.
you can do
Please
the
do
rest.
it. I
So,
think we have to do this for every dental question. We have to have this very
yes,
lame running joke. So go ahead,
yes.
Dr. Abel.
But actually, it's really funny because for some reason I just tuned into some Q&A that was uploaded to your channel that we did where this same thing repeated pretty much. And
Yeah.
then I was asking you like a couple of follow-up questions on exactly this, like the diet soda thing and like in
Okay.
general nutrition, the impact of that
And what did
on.
you learn?
So yeah, basically it's nutrition does have an impact. So what you eat does matter, but not as much as good dental hygiene. So rather, you would rather take as a dentist someone with a really crappy diet but excellent hygiene routine than someone who is not as good with the routine but has the best diet ever for theoretical best dental outcomes.
So I don't know exactly what I said in that podcast. I think that the bad diet in this case, it really depends on what somebody means by a bad diet because it ultimately it's kind of like the net amount of time that sugary and acidic substances are on the teeth and potentially almost in a sense like burrowing into the enamel. So what happens is over time if you have a low pH, so more acid, and this is why the diet aspect is very interesting because obviously people know that sugar is going to be problematic for many people for their teeth. And then they think, okay, diet soda, but diet soda is also acidic. Even like carbonated beverages, like just like a seltzer water, can be problematic again because of the acidity. And then your teeth are going to be more prone to caries or cavities, as most people know it. And so the issue, what I tell patients all the time, is I would much rather you just down like a huge piece of sugary cake or something than to be sipping soda all day. Like that is the worst because even if you had great dental habits, like let's say you're like, okay, I brush 2 to 3 times a day and I floss twice a day, which is really more than we even recommend. Which I mean, most of the time we recommend brush twice, floss once. If you get a second floss in, that's great. But even if you were excessive of that, if you were truly just had a crap diet and you're having sugar all day, or in this case, drinking 6 sodas a day, it's going to be pretty hard to undo that with dental habits because it's just a constant washing of the teeth with this substance. So it's like even if you floss in between, it's still happening. So I'm not saying don't then try to have better dental habits, but I would not recommend almost anybody to have that much soda long term. Also, while I don't think that there's much of a problem in terms of like the health ramifications outside of dental with diet soda, like that was obviously a ton of data on aspartame and sucralose. I'd say it's probably still a slight net negative. There's a lot of different research on it, on your insulin sensitivity and gut health. And I think there's a lot of unknowns, unfortunately, with that. But if you had like, hey, gun to your head, would it be better to have water or essentially sucralose water or aspartame water? I say, yeah, it's better to have water. So while I think it's fine, I have sucralose literally every day. I have the equivalent of probably 5 or 6 packs of Splenda because I just do like direct sucralose now. I just got on Amazon and that's been nice to have. I used to do way more Splenda, which potentially was problematic. But anyway, I don't think some is a problem, but 6 a day, I'd almost have to ask like, why are you consuming that much? Because that is quite a lot. I would say maybe one a day is probably reasonable, but it
And
seems very excessive.
a straw, how much does that help the situation?
Yeah, so I mean, yeah, I mean, if you're basically gonna like deep throat a straw and get it so that it doesn't coat your teeth at all, then sure, you're more or less avoiding that problem. The problem is the people who enjoy like hot coffee or something like that. If you're having like hot sugary coffee, 3 cups a day, same problem there. And again, you're sipping it. But I do tell people if you're having like iced coffee or soda, a straw can help. But even then, you're kind of going to diminish some of the enjoyment of it. A lot of times when you're enjoying these things, you're sipping it, it's kind of in your mouth for a few seconds, and then you're swallowing it. With if you're just literally putting the straw to the back of your mouth, you're probably not enjoying it as much as you otherwise would have. So I still think a straw is beneficial, but you got to think about like that relative to your enjoyment of the drink and why you're even having it in the first place.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, that's a bummer.
Yeah, I mean, look, man, there's plenty of people like contest dieters and whatnot who were just chugging like 2 liters of diet soda every day. I don't think for like a 12-week diet it's going to kill you. I would say it is not ideal. Um,
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Now that I think of it, I kind of just have phases when I do this kind of thing. It's not a constant thing.
And a lot of
Yeah.
these things, I think about this myself. A lot of these things, it's like, okay, so you imagine somebody lives to be 80 and they're eating like everything's perfect, right? All their habits are perfect. And if you think of any one individual habit, it's like, do I actually believe that that is going to actually have a net problem? So when somebody says, "Oh my gosh, diet soda is so horrible for you," I think of the context. Okay, so if you had diet soda, that like the two twins and the ones living the perfect lifestyle, the ones having one diet soda a day until they're supposedly 80, if they live that long, do I believe that there's going to be a net negative outcome? And if you said one cigarette a day, I'd say, yeah, I believe there's a net negative outcome there. If you said some other things, I'd say, yes, there's a net negative outcome. For some of these, the answer is like, we just don't know. And, we just have these short-term studies. I would guess that, again, a diet soda every day is like I would just guess that it's probably a little bit worse, but do I think that over those 80 years, like what does that mean worse? Does it mean that they get a little indigestion and a little bit of bloating, or does it mean that they get a couple more cavities, or does it mean that they're gonna get cancer that they otherwise wouldn't have, gotten? And again, for a lot of these, if we're being honest, we just don't know. But we do have a decent amount of evidence to say that, like again, like something like aspartame that's been highly studied, is probably pretty safe. I just generally lean towards less processed stuff than more processed stuff.
Yeah, that's probably smart.
All right. So last one, and we are starting where we ended with Kyriakos. So just kind of happened to be that
Nice.
way. All right. Man, do you have any tips for how I can know that the current weekly volume I'm doing gives me the most gains I can get over time and that I'm not, quote unquote, missing out on hypertrophy, basically?
Hmm. Nice question.
That is a good question.
So I'll start and then
Yeah.
you can take that. So I think you can have indicators. So one could be how easy it feels. Once again, like it's going to depend a little bit on how advanced you are. So if you're fairly advanced and you're really just trying to push the envelope as much as you can, then you're kind of gonna get to a point where it's just gonna feel hard always. So I don't think that if you're still able to progressively overload somewhat, then it's going to feel easy. Under that same breath, I would also say that if you're able to progressively overload at all after many years of training, then I would kind of lean towards the Eric Helms type mantra, which is progress, or at the very least, you can basically find solace in the idea that the grass is not going to be that much greener anywhere. So there might be some program out there that could get you even faster gains, but not necessarily, or most probably not faster enough gains to where you would actually notice the difference. So if this is like your second year of training, then yeah, it's potentially worth exploring whether you could optimize a few things and take your gains to the next level, because Yeah, we're talking about differences. Like, okay, if you're really messing things up, you might only gain like 5 pounds a year or 3 pounds a year. And if you're doing things really well, you could gain 12 pounds a year or something like that, which could be a huge difference. If it's your 10th year, then if you're able to progressively overload your workouts and you're actually seeing some meaningful progress over the months, then I would just not worry about this, honestly, because even if you're managing to eke out some more gains, it's gonna be something like, I don't know, instead of 4 pounds, you're gonna be putting on like 4.5 pounds in a year, which, well,
Yeah.
after 10 years, that would actually be pretty amazing. But as in like 4 pounds would be pretty amazing.
Sure.
But yeah, so but indicators would be how easy it feels. Does it feel like, okay, I could definitely handle more? How much your reps are dropping off could be another indication. So if your sets go like 6, 6, 6, or 6, 6, 5, or 10, 9, 8, that's not a lot of drop off in your reps. If you're dropping off quite a lot, that could be an indication that you would not benefit from more volume. So it's little indicators, but none of them are bulletproof. So it's they could nudge you in that direction, but mostly it just comes down to your training age and yeah. So that's basically how advanced you are should determine whether you should even look into that in the first place. So yeah,
Yeah, it's funny.
Dave.
This question is inevitably something that is asked by people who were like early intermediates and almost never anybody in an advanced stage. Because if you are in an advanced stage, you're just like, can I get any progress at all that's even measurable, right? So
Yeah.
I think one of the issues with the question is saying how I can know that my current weekly volume I'm doing gives me the most gains I can get over time. And obviously, maybe it's not obvious
Over time.
but that is going to change, right? And so I know obviously we've heard many other people talk about this as well, so this is not just originally from me, but your training volume and what's ideal is going to be different at years 2 and years 5 and years 7. And I think most people have at one point in their training career thought about, man, if I could just have like the best routine, what is optimal for me? And I remember thinking that as well. Not that I was looking for a golden routine, but that if magically you could just know exactly what to do on a given day and know exactly what to eat on a given day. But if you did have that, like you could imagine that that could theoretically be true. We would just never know. I mean, at least not with any current technology, be able to know what that is. I mean, that is what some people try to determine with like velocity training on a given day and heart rate variability. That's like the kind of purpose of some of these things that they're trying to find like exactly what's right for you that day or at least get closer to that idea. But we really don't have that. And so what is I remember Charles Poliquin used to have some quote and it was like the best routine is the one that you're not doing because basically I had the idea that like you're adapting so fast and you have to do something different all the time, which I don't agree with, but he used to talk about that.
Oh,
So
that's what it meant. I thought it was just a joke that like you're always looking for something better.
I'm pretty sure he meant it as like that you should be doing something different because like the new routine is going to be a better stimulus for you, etc. But anyway, so I don't mean to give such a nebulous answer. It's just like I don't think that. I mean, obviously, if you're not progressing at all, then yeah, that's a problem and you need to change things up. And I also don't want to be somebody who says, look, if you're making any progress, don't rock the boat. Because if you are a year into training and you're putting like 1 pound on this week and then like one rep and then like you don't put another rep on for another month, like that probably is suboptimal, right? And so I don't think there's a way to know that it's exactly where you should be, but I think there are standards that we can look at as like what is generally good progress for the amount of time that you have been lifting and kind of go based on that. And again, we don't have to get into exact numbers here, but we talked about before, like when you're completely new, you could be even seeing weekly progress. And then when you're intermediate, monthly to like, bi-monthly progress and then advanced, it's like could literally be like over the years you have to look. But I would also focus on things like how fatigued are you? I don't love the whole thing of like, am I getting a pump and whatnot? Because that, I think could just be very artificial based on your rep range and volume and everything. So I would more so say find a standard volume, whether that's like 6 to 8, 6 to 10 sets. Are you progressing? And you can trial higher volumes and see if that helps. But even then, it can be difficult because, as we've discussed before, there's for many people a very wide range of volumes at work. And it might look like if you're watching the podcast, not just listening, you might be going up, and then there's like kind of an asymptote, but kind of levels, and then it just slowly, even then, it's going to slowly go down. It's not like, oh, I mean, you could double your volume and still get more or less identical results. It's could be a very, I know you able to go up to like 60 sets for your back or something like that at one point just to trial it out. I went up to 30 plus sets for my back and I didn't really notice a benefit, but I also didn't notice a detriment. Like it was just fine. So
Yeah.
I don't think it's like how much volume can I do? It's kind of like what gets me to a level where like more is just not really beneficial. And again, that's also going to depend on your sleep and your diet. Like, so I know it's like, again, we're giving these like unclear answers, but I mean, this is essentially where coaching comes in, right? This is like full on coaching of somebody where it's like, okay, what did we do this week? How did you progress and how did you respond compared to last week? And like that's the whole process. So like if we could answer this question in 2 minutes, like there would not really be a need for coaching.
And everybody is completely individual. Like all of my programs look entirely different. Just
Right,
kidding.
right.
No, but like, so, so I think the very real answer, as someone who has been experimenting with these kinds of things for a long time, is that you will never truly know whether you're doing the perfect approach for your progress, and you're not going to do if this amount of volume is exactly the right amount for you. The so I think as you get more advanced, you're gonna have a better idea simply because the for some people at least, the ranges are going to narrow down a little bit. So you're not going to get away as easily with doing too much because each set is going to take more out of you. And if you're not doing enough, then it's going to show up more easily because you're just not going to go anywhere. Whereas, like when you were a beginner, you're still going to eke out some slow progress, even if you're not doing enough, and you can get away with doing more because you just cannot damage yourself that badly. To your point, that yeah, like you said that you didn't notice that much with different volume amounts and that I pushed up crazy high. And I will never truly know whether that actually benefited me. And I also think that when it comes down to this maximum recoverable volume, I think there are definitely people I've spoken with, some people who notice these clear drop offs where I just cannot tolerate this much. But I think, like, overwhelmingly, for a lot of people, at least for a lot of muscle groups, what actually stops you from doing a certain amount of volume is not whether you can truly recover from something. Like, even in the cases where someone says that, like, okay, when I push things up to 15 sets, I just couldn't recover anymore, whereas from 14 I could. Even there, I have to question to some extent whether, like, okay, let's say it's your chest, and maybe I heard this example from someone, but could you truly not find like one more set of like pec deck flies that you could not recover from, or
Right.
that you could still recover from? And if you could do that, could you then not find one more set of pec flies somewhere that you could recover from? So I think it very often will just come down to, yeah, like time and energy, and also managing injuries and things like that, which so then exercise selection becomes another factor which kind of
Sure.
conflates this whole thing. So I don't think you will ever truly know, but experiment and be smart and gradual with it, and then you will get closer over time.
Here we go. All right, guys, another round of Q&A in the books. Feel free to send your questions on Instagram or down in the comments below. I will say I think I am not as good with getting them from the YouTube comments. I probably should be, but
Mm.
if they're in a DM, I'm usually pretty good about that. But yeah, all right. So, Abel, where can people find you?
Thank you. You can find me SSD Abel is my handle on YouTube. So yeah, and Instagram actually I remember it's Abel Fit Stuff. Now that I used it more, I know what my handle is there.
Let's see. Yes, that's the I think on Able or on Instagram, yeah, the Able Fit stuff, just SSD Able. And you've been ramping up, I think, with more coaching as well, right?
Yeah, I have been more active both on YouTube and on Instagram. So just doing more stuff on the fitness front.
Cool. So if you want to get shredded, go ahead and hire Able.
Yes, indeed. Thanks for the shout out.
Sure.